Welcome everyone, my name is Willard Clapper and I'm here today with the distinct honor of interviewing Loui Popish, one of the guys who kind of raised me when I was a kid in Aspen, Colorado, one of the many. I'm interviewing him for the Aspen Veterans History Project, a project that is has been started to try to gather together the stories and times and wisdom of the veterans in the Aspen and the Roaring Fork, the Aspen area and the Roaring Fork Valley. Loui Popish is with me today, as I said. And Loui, how old are you now? I hate to do that to you, but
77.
77 years old, and he's. I know as a young kid, the reason I say that stuff earlier is a kid growing up in Aspen, Colorado, and Loui and I were talking about this earlier. One of the greatest parts of being in this town was that everybody cared for each other. Everybody looked out for each other. So no matter where I was as a kid, there was always somebody who was looking out for me, and you were one of those guys. Just for the record here, Loui, what was your what was the war in which you were entered, and what was your branch of service?
Korean, first Korean. Navy, regular Navy.
Okay, and what was your rank when you finally left?
Electrician's mate, second class.
Electrician's mate.
Second class.
Okay, and where exactly did you serve? Of course, I was looking at some stuff here. You were kind of all over the place.
Yeah, first cruise was mostly off the coast of Korea. Mm-hmm. Second cruise was in with the Mediterranean fleet.
Yeah.
So.
That sounds like a great time. I'd like to start out, Loui, by talking about what it was like being you in Aspen, Colorado. Both of us kind of have similar backgrounds in that our grandparents, grandparents, etc., came from European stock, came over here to mine and do whatever. What is your background, your family's background?
Well, my father came from Yugoslavia when he was 17. And both of my grandmothers came from Yugoslavia, and one of my grandfathers on my grandmother's side. My uncles, two of my uncles, and one aunt were directly from Yugoslavia. And my father worked in the silver mines, and both of his brothers in the silver mines all their life.
So they came here as mine did, as my grandparents did, to be
right.
To be silver miners. Yeah.
Or mostly in the smuggler.
Yeah.
And the conhole.
Mm-hmm. And as we were talking earlier about how tough those guys were, it's just amazing how they did it. There were a couple things though that really stuck out, and I think, Loui, would you tell me what it was like for those guys, for those people living in Aspen in terms of their day-to-day lives? What was it like for them?
Very tough. We didn't have a bathroom in the house. We had the old outhouse, of course. And my father finally put a bathroom in there, I guess, when I got into high school. When I was a freshman.
Spoiling you, was he?
Freshman in high school. And my mother did all the cooking on a coal and wood stove, heated the water on a coal and wood stove, washed all our clothes from a boiler that was heated on the top of the wood stove, and had a hand wringer washer, and did all that by hand for, what, 6 of us. And cooked. We always had 3 square meals a day.
Yep.
And my father was very emphatic about us sitting down and having supper together. If we weren't there, you missed out, period.
That was it?
I mean, as far as our high school years.
Yeah. Well, let's look back for a second. What was it like? What would you do on an... You woke up in the morning, it was summertime, you were 10 years old in Aspen. What did you do?
Took care of the garden, and we raised about 100 rabbits. It was our job to feed those rabbits, and had about 100 chickens in a chicken run. It was our job to weed the gardens, feed the chickens, clean the pens, and that was about it at 10 years old.
Yeah. Did you get to play?
Oh yeah, we went up the old swimming hole in the summertime. We made our own ski runs in the winter. We had wooden skis, homemade wooden skis.
Yeah, homemade wooden skis?
Yeah, my dad made some wooden skis for it.
And how would he make them, just quickly?
Well, they were just long boards, you know.
Yeah.
And what they do is heat them up in a boiler and turn the tips up and tie them back with wire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then figure out some
Just
way
a
to attach.
strap.
What'd you do? Nail your like the cartoons? Did you nail your boots to
No, they just had a strap and had a rubber off of an inner tube that came around the toe and the back of the heel. And of course, your strap over your boot held it in there.
And where would you ski?
Oh, we had a little place back of my grandmother's. We cut our own trails over the old dairy place.
Right.
Hoagland's Dairy, which is Little Nell
Yeah,
now.
Little Nell. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, got our own trails in the summertime, little trails, but that was it. Because Roach Run wasn't even in existence.
Right. Yeah, when did Roach Run come about? It was 40s, 50s?
50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first one. So you lived through those years that we would call the quiet years. So as a 10-year-old, you know, you mostly did things around the garden, around the house, contributing your part to surviving here.
That's right.
Yeah. And what about high school? What was it like in high school here?
It's great.
That was fun.
Classes were small, and it was during the war years. They were short of teachers, and they brought some of the older guys in. I remember our old, I guess he was Latin, taught Latin. He'd fall asleep in class, you know. Poor old guy. He just couldn't make it, you know.
Couldn't make it through a full day.
No, that's right.
And I'm sure you were very understanding.
But we had some good teachers, too, especially our math teachers. And I'm thankful for them because it helped me out in the service for trigonometry and geometry and algebra and stuff like that. They were just terrific teachers.
Yeah.
And English teachers, they were strict. I mean, there was no fooling around. We had to have study hall, and they made us stay in study hall. You just didn't wander around.
Yeah.
You had to spend your 8 hours in school or whatever it was, from 9 until 4.
Yeah. But it sounds like school was a bit of a vacation in a way, because then you didn't have to do all that work.
I don't know. When I got into high school, I went to work at the Hotel Jerome.
Oh, really?
In the 7th grade. And I worked there at cleaning the bar, mopping the bar, and restocking the bar in the morning with beer, kegs of beer. And then at night after basketball practice, I'd go make homemade ice cream.
Wow.
And I'd have some of the basketball team come back,
And they would...
I'd have them. And my sister worked in the kitchen at the hotel, and she'd bring pie back there.
Oh.
Of course, we had it made.
Yeah. So you had all the ice cream you wanted. All you had to do was churn it up. And
it wasn't all work. I mean, it was work.
Yeah.
For $30 a month.
Whew. Doesn't sound like much money, does it?
Not really, because every morning, you know, I'd be up at 5. My mother would have breakfast ready at 6, and I'd go to the hotel and do my job and then go to school.
Yeah.
And that continued clear through high school.
Yeah. And high school was fun, I'm sure. It was fun for everybody here.
Yeah.
Your main sporting endeavor at that time was
Basketball.
basketball.
Sure.
Where did they play basketball around here?
And the Armory Hall.
Okay, and
did
where
it
was
well.
that?
Where the City Hall is now. Yeah, it was, we had to sweep the floors after basketball practice, so we got out of paying rent. And the floor wasn't the best because they used to roller skate there in the summertime.
Oh.
Had a roller rink.
Get it nice and slippery for you.
Well, not only that, it had some of the boards were chipped and stuff. You'd go around dribbling the basketball and you'd lose the ball, you know, for some unknown reason.
So yeah, you'd be dribbling and all of a sudden it'd go flying off somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had the whole town back with them.
Yeah.
That was another thing. You know, it was a good community. And for basketball uniforms, we'd have to go to the businessman. School didn't provide anything. Nothing in the winter uniform.
So you'd have to go out and ask somebody to sponsor you.
We'd have to ask for donations. And the old uniforms were orange and black originally. And those things were just getting threadbare.
Yeah.
So when I was a junior, we went to all the businessmen. We finally got back and got new colors, cardinal and black.
Right.
And we were in hog's heaven
Yeah.
with new uniforms.
Well, those
Especially
red
when
black,
we went
yeah.
down the valley and showed them off.
Oh boy, I bet they hated that. And so began the beginning of the elitist Aspen group. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, they're so rich up there. They have new uniforms.
Really.
Oh wow.
It was, yeah.
And what were you called at that time? What was the name of the team?
We changed it to skiers.
But before that, you were something else. You were
No, we were just the Aspen Pheasant.
the Aspen team.
Yeah.
Because I remember somebody told me one time they were called the Roosters or something like that. So you were just the Aspen team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Loui, Popish,
Aspen
and those guys.
won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were probably the center, being as tall as you are, I imagine.
I did make captain for 2 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. Well, the other thing about Loui that's interesting for you guys out there, he was a swing dancer. He was the king of swing in Aspen, Colorado.
Country Western was
Country
mine.
Western man. He was something else. He was all our hero. As a kid growing up, we would go to the bars. I know that's hard to imagine. But, boy, it was great fun watching you dance because you love to dance.
Still do.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the book, The Quiet Years, which was written about the time when you were growing up and all of that, almost everybody that was interviewed said the same thing. We loved to dance. We had dances. We went to the dance, the dance, the dance, the dance.
Yeah, they used to have, flower show dances. And the American Legion was going full blast.
Yeah.
American Legion used to put on dances quite often.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty neat. Okay, let's take a jump here. You graduated from high school, and you had to make a decision. What am I going to do with my life? You enlisted in the Navy.
No.
Or not? What did you go do from
No,
there?
for 2 years I worked for Ski Corporation.
Oh, really? That was in the very beginning.
In my senior year, we cleared Ruthie's Run. It was all high school kids. We started from the town, went up to the snowball,
Really?
cleared that whole trail out. There must have been about 15 of us from our high school years. We cleared Ruthie's Run, and right after that, I went with Red Roland.
Right?
Of course, I was on the high school ski teams and the racing teams. So Red asked me, since you could ski, you want to go to work? And I said, sure. So I did, and I worked as maintenance for a while. Then I stayed up the sun deck for one winter and skied down the Midway. Started lift number 1, brought the guys up to Midway, and then I worked around Midway and
By
last
that
trip
time,
up to the.
yeah. By that time, did you have real skis and real boots?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh,
You
yeah.
were fancy then.
Oh, Groswalds,
Yeah.
North.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, but
Wow.
our ski racing stuff, it was all 10th Mountain Division equipment, leftover stuff, boots and everything.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of nice having those guys around, I guess,
Oh,
at
yeah.
that time. Yeah.
Yeah, they used to come over on Friday, and they'd teach us jumping, cross country, and some slalom. Johnny Litchfield,
Johnny Litchfield, yeah.
Percy Rideout, and Barney McLean. They'd all teach us a little bit,
Well, those were the big names in American skiing for a
Yeah.
long time, weren't they?
They didn't spend a lot of time on this, but enough of the basics.
Yeah. Well, they figured you were young and figured it out from there, huh?
Really?
Yeah. So 2 years you were, and when you were logging Aspen Mountain, you would just work your way up. So you'd cut the logs down and you'd haul them down with a horse, or?
Well, there was mostly lodgepole pine. We just cut them into, and it was all hand stuff. We didn't have many chainsaws at that time. They had an old, what was his name? They had an old saw that was on 2 wheels, and it was a mandrel type thing. And we just guided that. It was dangerous.
I bet.
Yeah. And so it was then, during those years, that there was a light opera group in Aspen. And I joined the light opera group because I was singing at the Catholic Church since I was about 5 years old. So during this opera, it was between Thanksgiving, just before, right after Christmas of 1950. And we were putting on trial by jury. And Buddy Strong, my neighbor, he came backstage at the intermission that night. And he said, our draft numbers are up for Korea, or up for the Army. And he said, I'm not going to the Army. I'm joining the Navy. Do you want to be with me? made up my mind right then, because I had had 4 brothers in the Navy prior to that. And so the next day we left for Denver. At noon the next day we were in the Navy.
Wow.
I mean, we were signed up.
Yeah.
Because it was about 2 days or 3 days before New Year's. So they told us, don't go home. You got to stick around Denver. You got to report the 3rd of January at the recruiting station in Denver. And Buddy said, we're not staying here in Denver. We're going home for New Year's.
The party animal that he was.
So that's where it was. We came back on 3rd of January. Yeah. We were sworn into the Navy. And they said to us, well, you'd probably be going to San Diego. And then they changed their mind. They said, you're going to Great Lakes. Boy, talk about a big
There's a
discipline.
switch.
Really.
You went from hot and sunny and beautiful to cold.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. But you decided to join the Navy. Now, why did Bud not want to join the Army? Did he?
Have no idea.
No idea. He had his reason, though, for sure.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But you, being a good pal, said, sure, I'll go with you.
Yeah, and I had never even thought about it.
Yeah.
You know, except that my brothers were when he mentioned our draft numbers were up once.
That was it.
Yeah.
So you had really, you were you've been a lifetime electrician.
Yeah.
I know that. And, but where did you get that training?
Well, when I got out of basic training at Great Lakes.
Oh, I see.
They said I had enough of a GQ rating that you could go right to electric.
Okay, now what's a GQ?
General classification test when you first join the Navy. Or I mean, it's a GCT.
Okay.
And I had high enough grade that I could ask for any school. So I asked for electronics. They said, what's your second choice? I said, electrical, I guess. And they said, well, electronics is filled up. They said, just pack your sea bag, go over to the school. So they didn't even let me go home. I was disappointed after basic. Yeah. Then I went through about, I guess it was 5 months of really intensive training.
Let's take a step back. I want to talk a little bit about your boot camp situation. Now, tell me, what was boot camp like for a Navy guy?
It's a piece of cake for me.
Really?
Yeah, because coming out of Aspen and skiing up on the mountain, nothing was, get there, it was, I always had discipline around the house. My father was nothing but discipline.
He was tough.
No foolishness.
Yeah.
So to get in there and have somebody to tell you what to do, it was really not that hard.
Yeah. It made sense to you.
Yeah. You needed it.
Yeah.
It did me good, but
And the physical part of it was?
No. Nothing rigorous, A lot of marching, a lot of foolishness.
Yeah.
They'd give me a dummy rifle made out of wood and stand clothesline watch from midnight till 4 in the morning.
Oh, my God.
With the wind blowing off of Lake Michigan. It had to be 32 below zero. And they wouldn't let you put up the collar on your pea coat, to protect yourself. No way. I was Navy,
I guess they were just toughening you up for a life on the North Atlantic or something.
Really.
Goodness. So anyway, it was...
you had to march to chow and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I remember going to chow line. You'd be probably 15 companies waiting to get into the chow hall. And if you got up to the officer in charge of the chow line and smarted off, anybody smart, back to the line. And like I said, it was 15, 20 below zero.
So everybody was very obedient. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. Any instructors or any experiences there stick out in your mind?
Not really.
They were all pretty good?
We had an old guy that was the chief in charge. It was an all Colorado company.
Oh, really?
And we didn't do too well as far as march.
Yeah.
No way. No.
Too many independent spirits there, I guess.
It just didn't make it that way.
Yeah. Well, these are all probably mostly country kids and people like you who are used to being independent and making their way.
And we all traveled from Colorado on the same train to Great Lakes.
So you got to know each other a little bit. And,
you know, several of them from Newcastle.
Yeah. So after basic training, then you said you went to electrician school. Where was that? Where were you stationed?
Great Lakes.
So it was in the same area.
Just a different camp.
Yeah. And you went to the electrician school.
Yeah. So when we finished with school, the first 10 of us got to pick a ship that we wanted to be on. And I was 7th. So my sister was on the West Coast. And I said, boy, I'm picking a ship on the West Coast. And that destroyer, the DD-530, was up for grabs. So I took it, and that was down at San Diego. And that's where I was assigned.
And this is the 530 here.
Yeah,
and what does
but
DD
when I got
stand
down there, they just brought it out of mothballs. And man, it was rust, you know, some rust. I looked at it and I said, man, we're sailing this thing.
Yeah.
And I about cried.
Yeah.
I expected something, you know, beautiful.
Oh, yeah. But obviously you got it spruced up.
Yeah. The yard workers were working 9 a day on that thing, and then the crew wasn't formed when I got down there. So the chief in charge said, you just take the whole week off, report to me every morning till the crew is formed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. We got the crew formed. We helped the yard workers bring that thing out of mothballs. And when I first looked at it, up on the bridge, it had all the ribbons of the campaigns that was in World War II. And there were a lot of them. Here's the whole list of them. But it still had the shell holes in on the bridge where it took aircraft.
Oh, wow.
So that
they
kind of made you think a little.
Yeah. Did they leave them there? Did they repair them? Or just...
No, they repaired them.
Yeah. Oh, man. So it had seen a lot of combat before you ever touched it.
Yeah, so we finally had sea trials out of San Diego. Mm-hmm. Then they shipped it us to San Francisco. And we got the propellers worked on. Ed Gegrich was working in the yards there at Mare Island.
Uh-huh.
And I met him when they were working on those. And then they sent us back down to San Diego, and then they said, you're assigned to the East Coast.
Here you go, back to the cold.
So we went through the Panama Canal,
uh-huh.
went right into dry dock up in Norfolk, Virginia, because it needed some more work. They took the torpedo tubes off, put more 60-millimeter guns, anti-aircraft guns on, new radar equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And
why did they remove the torpedo tubes?
They were ineffective.
Yeah, they weren't going to be used anymore.
Useless.
Yeah.
And
but those big guns were...
Yeah. So when it was all said and done, they sent us down to Guantanamo Bay for underway training. And we didn't pass the first test because the machinery was falling apart yet. We were too busy holding everything together. So finally, I had to go into the Portsmouth Naval Hospital. I had pneumonia bad. And they sent me down for the second time, and they passed. When I came back, I picked the ship up again. We went to the North Atlantic for anti-submarine exercises. We were contacting submarines out of Groton, Connecticut in the North Atlantic, and I mean the sea was rough.
Oh, I bet.
Oh, it was tough. And so finally we got back down to Virginia, yeah. And then we took on a lot of supplies. We headed back to Panama.
Well, that's submarine
back
training.
Back up to San Diego.
Yeah, that submarine training had to be scary. I mean, not only was it rough, but that you're dealing with something that you can't see.
Well, it was mostly the sonar people.
Yeah.
And they were busy.
They better do a good job.
Oh, yeah. Especially in that North Atlantic.
Now, as an electrician on that ship, I mean, how many were there first? Did you have a dozen electricians? What?
6.
6.
We were busy. We had 200 motors, plus all the rest of the lighting to take care of. And you had to take ground readings on all the motors at least once a week to make sure the insulation was okay. So we were busy that way.
Wow. 6 electricians on a boat that size.
We had 2 first class that were really great guys. They had a lot of years in aboard destroyers. So.
And you were a second class. Is that?
At that time, I was 3rd class. Now, I didn't make 2nd class until, well, I made 2nd class when we left Guantanamo. I really did.
Okay. So let's
and we
continue.
only had 1 chief.
But that was okay. Was it better to have 1 chief or?
Well, chief, he was a retired guy, and they brought him back in.
Oh.
First class, the in charge said, "You go back up in the chief's quarters and just set out the crews. We don't want to see you back here." And he did.
He knew enough to stay out of the way.
Yeah, he just stayed out of the way.
No, that's probably smart. So when did you start heading to combat, or when did you start heading
Right after
overseas?
we left Norfolk, back through the Panama Canal, got up to San Diego, and we took on ammunition and fuel. And we headed for Pearl Harbor. And then we had 2 days at Pearl Harbor. I got 1 day to go around, so I took a trip around the whole island of Oahu.
Yeah.
And then we set sail for Midway, the island of Midway.
Midway Island.
We got to Midway, we took on more fuel, and I had a half a day to go over on the island, see the Goonie birds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So then we set out for Sasebo, Japan, and right after we left Midway, we hit a hurricane-force winds.
Ooh.
And I'll tell you, it tore all the lifelines down, buckled some of the stuff in front of the gun mount, and the depth charge racks back here. One of them broke loose. Depth charges were rolling around. Nobody could go back there because the sea was, it's the first time I thought we'd never make it through.
Really?
Because then the stories were circulating from the older guys that said destroyers in Second World War, 4 of them had listed so far to one side it took on water through the stacks, blew up the whole boilers in the ships, 4 of them in one hurricane. So I got concerned.
Yeah.
Did a lot of praying.
Yep.
During that.
Your Catholic faith came on strong.
3 days. 3 days of that, and we couldn't go up. The mess hall was down about in here. And to get from there up, you had to hang on to all this railing on the side of the ships. And a lot of my buddies down in the living quarters, they were so seasick. And you couldn't go to the mess hall because they couldn't serve. It was too rough. You'd go up to the galley and get sandwiches. Now, all I was doing was hauling sandwiches back to the guys that were so seasick that they couldn't get out of their bunks.
Why didn't you get seasick?
I have no idea. No idea.
That
Never did.
I mean, here you are from the mountains. The closest thing to an ocean you've ever seen is Maroon Lake.
Never did get seasick. I used to get some tremendous headaches in the North Atlantic. Whenever we come into port and then leave, every time we'd leave, I'd get headaches. Tremendous headaches. But then midday it was cleared up. Never got seasick.
Wow.
Thank God.
All right, well, continue on. So you're leaving Japan now and going...
Yeah, we had to go into dry dock, get repaired.
Right.
We headed up to Korea, and we got up there to relieve one of the destroyers up there. And they had all the foul weather gear. We didn't have any. So we pulled it alongside them, and they threw all their foul weather gear off. Half of it was torn.
Yeah, beat up, no
only
good.
Only the deck apes, we called them deck apes,
Yeah.
got to use this foul weather gear. And it was cold up toward North Korea. And we went right into the blockade of all the North Korean ports. And that's all we did was patrol the whole coast of Korea, all the way from Wonsan Harbor all the way up to Vladivostok, Russia.
Wow.
We could see the lights of Vladivostok at night. And the only thing, we had minesweepers ahead of us most of the time. And the time we didn't, they had the gunner's mates out on the deck with rifles, because the Koreans were floating mines down in crates. Any kind of derbis.
Just something, yeah.
Yeah. And that was our biggest worry. And we'd operate probably within sometimes a half mile of the coast.
Yeah.
And you could hear machine gun chatter from the Marines over there. And they had what they called blocks. And each destroyer had a block. The main supply line from North Korea down to South Korea was through the railroad along the coast. So each destroyer had this block, and it had tunnels, and it had bridges, and it was our job to keep those bridges, tunnels, and so forth.
Keep that open.
Keep that, keep them blocked for the,
Yeah.
so the North Koreans
Yeah,
couldn't use them.
exactly, yeah, okay.
But like I say, the biggest threat were mines.
And you said they were standing out there with rifles. Were they shooting the mines to try to
Well,
set them off?
sometimes they'd use the anti-aircraft 20 millimeters. They'd shoot right into the crates,
Blow
and
'em
if
up.
there was anything, explode them. But we were operated a lot with the cruiser Manchester and the battleship New Jersey. And New Jersey used to fire over our heads, and you could almost see the shell.
Whoa,
You could hear it,
yeah.
and you could see gun emplacements up on the cliffs just go up in smoke. We operated probably a week with the battleship New Jersey. And then we went back to Yokosuka, Japan for rest. And that was after about 5 weeks at sea. And then they shipped us out, and we went with a high-speed carrier group, which was the Philippine Sea. And the main duty there was to pick up down pilots that run out of gas or whatever
Right.
after their runs over North Korea.
Wow.
We didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
There are a couple of destroyers that did, and we just run plane guard detail for these guys.
Did you ever have to engage the enemy directly?
No. They used to. Whenever those trains had run down, they tried to run them in the night.
Yeah.
And two destroyers would operate together. One day we would fire the 5-inch mounts, try to knock out all the train, and the other destroyer would fire star shells and illuminate the whole back. So we alternated, and we'd take on ammunition from a ammunition ship about every other day.
Wow.
Because we were firing.
So there's a lot of booming going on.
And we finally, I think it was just before we were supposed to leave, we knocked out a whole train. And we somewhere in this book it shows where we were awarded this thing, a special thing.
For knocking out a train. It's like the ultimate carnival trick there. You get to shoot.
We got 2 stars on our career and a ribbon for it.
All right. Yeah, well, I'll talk to you a little bit more about those here in a second. That's pretty neat. So you were involved, but did you feel...
Well, I would say one thing. It was a Sunday afternoon. And it was one of these crazy Navy things that I'll never understand. We were following the cruiser Manchester into this harbor. I don't even know what harbor it was. I just happened to be out on deck. It was a Sunday afternoon. We weren't at general quarters or in our battle stations. And all of a sudden, the Manchester gets hit up in front of us.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah. And we were in our battle stations. Immediately, we did a 90-degree turn, came back out of the harbor. I don't know what happened on the Manchester. Still don't.
Really?
Yeah.
So it just...
Nobody was at general quarters, and only few of us out on the main deck and saw it.
And just abandoned it, essentially.
Yeah, we just
turned around and got out.
Got out of the way. Never understand that. I'll never understand.
Well, yeah, that's one of those things that, yeah, somebody should question someday. I don't... Anyway, you probably thought about it a lot afterwards.
I really did. Could have
those
been
poor
us.
guys. Yeah, sure, it could have been. And then all of a sudden you see these guys turn around and leave. Oh my goodness. So you were in Korea For how long? How long did you guys stay there?
I guess we were there from about January till August, something like that, off and on.
Off and on?
Well, we were twice back at Sasebo, once at Yokosuka. Yeah.
Now, when you got some days off, you'd head to Japan to get repaired and fuel and all that sort of stuff.
Some guys got liberty.
Did you get
Some guys went up to Tokyo. I wasn't fortunate. I'll tell you what happened. I used to do standby duty for the married guys.
Oh, I see.
So when they got back to the States, or in the States, they could go home to their families, you know, and I'd stand by. And I had a lot of standby time built up. Well, I couldn't see anything in Japan to go over for a lot of guys, and it was such a short trip that I just stayed aboard and let the guys go and did standby duty for them, because I knew that sometime I was going to get back on it.
You had to get even.
Because I knew we would have to get back to Virginia somehow, and we were going to hit a lot of ports, and I wanted to see those ports, and that's exactly what happened.
Oh, well, that's one. So it wasn't all bad, I guess. Yeah.
No.
So when you were on the ship and you were out there cruising, what was your duty like? I mean, you couldn't be on all the time, so you'd be on, off.
Well,
how did that
was,
operate?
like I said, you had 4 on and 4 off. And
So it would be 4 24-hour days in a row?
all the time, you know.
Just-
You had to have the generator going.
Yeah.
My standby, or my general quarter station was the same as my watch station,
Yeah.
which
So you
was
were
the
right there.
after generator. And so we'd have four hours on, no matter what it was, and 4 hours off. Then we had drills in between time. You had general quarters just for drills to keep you alert.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get off a watch at midnight. The drills would go down at 2 in the morning. You'd stand watch right back where
Right
you
into
were
a drill, yeah.
till 4, and then you go back on watch again till 8 o'clock in the morning. And I mean, it was grueling as far as physically, because it was hot down in the engine room.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you weren't up on the sunny deck there, huh?
down right above the boilers.
Wow. Amazing. Now, as an electrician, your responsibilities included, first of all, making sure that generator kept going. But
And-
what other kinds of things?
Oh, make sure everything was paired, because every time that back 5-inch mount would fire, it'd blow some of the light fixtures off of the overhead. You'd have to
So you're constantly,
yeah, and of course you had all these motors to had grease fittings, zerk fittings. You had
Right.
to have them greased. You had to take those ground readings. You just had to make sure everything was running.
yeah,
And for 6 guys,
you were hopping.
yeah.
And it was sort of a solo thing, it would seem like where you were, you had a certain number of things to take care of, and somebody else was in another part of the ship.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And I was in damage control also, because back in Virginia I'd gone to firefighting school and all the things that needed for damage control. So you had to keep the damage control stuff, make sure it was all there. You had to use mattresses, to know how to use mattresses to plug holes in the deck. And
Yeah.
4x4s to stall up everything, and know how to repair steam lines and stuff like that. So it was not only that, you had classes, and me being a second class, the Navy has you, each division, go around and teach the next division of your duties and how the electrical thing operates. In other words, when I was teaching some of the guys electrical stuff, the next day, maybe the bosun mate be teaching us how to drop the anchor, how to lower the boats, and all the things that
Oh,
went.
yeah. So there was a
It
lot
was
of cross-training.
continuous
Yeah.
education that way.
Wow, that's a great idea. Well, you're on a boat. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You have only you to depend on. So
That's it,
the
boy.
more you know.
And if you ever read that book, The Last of the Tin Can Sailors,
The Last of the Tin Can Sailors. I
yeah,
like to
and
read
that
it.
was that late 8 golf
Uh-huh.
thing, you'd realize why that training became important.
Yeah.
Because some of those guys, the chiefs, had all got killed in the first and second class, were actually running the ship, some instances. And they could.
Yeah. Now, you won a couple of medals or
No,
awards
no.
of some kind. What were those
Well,
for?
the awards were a Korean ribbon with 2 battle stars, and that was mostly for our duties, like keeping the harbors blocked up and stuff like that. But actually, no physical stuff.
For being successful, for doing
Yeah,
a good
right.
job, yeah. That's good. And you know, I think back on it, you know, and I was never in any of the armed services. I slipped through there somehow, thank goodness. I don't know how I would have done, but of all the things that I would have wanted to do, I think the Navy to me always looked to be the safest. But now, listening to you, I'm not so sure.
Well, you know, I think you get a false sense of security. You see all these guns around you and everybody operating, you say, God, nothing can happen to us. You know, you just get that feeling.
No.
And everybody's working together and we're having a good time when we get on shore.
I bet you really got close to some of those guys.
Oh, man.
Are you still in contact with any of them?
I used to, one of the enginemen from St. Louis, and he finally died 2 years ago. We kept in contact. But the rest of us, I don't know, we just kind of disappeared.
Well, you played on that team and then it was over.
Mostly because these guys, we were all aboard this one. And then when I got back after this, I was assigned to this Mediterranean fleet.
So you did
I
finish
lost
up your
contact.
tour of duty in Korea, and then you went back to the States and you got reassigned. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we went down, we went from Japan right down to, what am I trying to say, Hong Kong. And right before we reached Hong Kong, we crossed the international date line, which, when you cross that with the Navy, you get initiated. And I mean, that's something to remember. The first thing, the night before you cross the international date line, they have a guy running around the ship rattling chains, just so you wouldn't go to sleep.
So you couldn't sleep.
Yeah, and they always, over the loudspeaker, would be saying, beware of pollywogs, because they called us pollywogs. And the next morning, you get up, even the officers, any officer that hadn't crossed, they got you down to the mess hall, and they served you beans with castor oil on them. No silverware. You had to eat it with your hands or just slap it up with your tongue. And they enforced it down, even the officers. They just made
Had to eat it. Oh.
Yeah. And then, when we
I
got...
want to break in just for a second. What does castor oil do to you?
Oh.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that anybody who's watching knows
Right.
that. Castor oil is one of the original...
Right, you're pretty loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, you get down, out of the mess hall, and they washed you down with fire hoses.
Oh, jeez.
And then all the guys that had crossed the international date line, which were about 60 out of 200 some, they had sawed-off fire hoses, and you crawled along the deck, and they whacked you on the fanny, about 60 guys. And they got up to where the royal baby was, and there was a big fat chief, and he had the ungodly stuff smeared on his belly button. We had to kiss it.
He was the royal baby?
Yeah, and he was in a diaper.
God bless America.
And then you went to the royal barber, and he could cut you anyway. He just cut us.
He just messed with you.
Oh, man, he made a mess of everybody. And then you had a drink out of they had a guy with his leg tied up. He was like a pirate, you know, and had a patch over his arm. And he had a bottle, and I swear somebody urinated in it. And awful taste, and you had a drink from it.
Want a drink of water, Loui?
And, I mean, I about threw up. Just about.
The first time. You're not seasick,
Yeah.
but...
And then over on the starboard side, they had collected garbage for a whole week in canvas. And they made canvas chute and put all this garbage. You had to crawl through this canvas chute of garbage. So you got to the end, and then they washed you off with fire hoses, and that was it.
And then you were okay. Then you were one of the team. Oh, my God. That is an incredible story. I don't think a lot of people know that particular story.
Navy men.
Navy men do. Crossing that international date line.
Yeah. Of course, we went into Hong Kong. Hair was a mess. I went right to a barber and
You just
got
finished it
cleaned
off.
up.
Yeah.
Then we headed for Singapore, and the British Royal Navy let us use all their facilities. So we had use of the bar and golf clubs and so forth.
Oh, well.
And then we headed for, which is now Sri Lanka, but then it was Ceylon. It belonged to India, or the British. And we tied up at Colombo, and I got a day off, and I went up through where they raise tea, up to this little place they call Candy. It's a resort, and they have a bar and so forth.
Beautiful area, I understand.
Yeah. And then we headed for Arabia and into the Red Sea, and we got to stop at Aden. And all this time I had an 8mm camera with me. I took pictures of everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have them.
You just didn't bring them for us, huh?
Well, the kids made them into videos.
Oh.
But it has a lot of family stuff mixed in with
Yeah.
it, so I didn't. And the guys didn't want me to show a lot of the other stuff, because it was the airport at Aspen without any runway paved around it. It was dirt,
Yeah.
skiing on Little Nell on the old T-bar.
Those are treasures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in Aden, I had run out of film somewhere along the line. So I got to go over in Aden, Arabia. I mean, it's a forlorn place.
Yeah.
We saw all these ravens flying up on the hillside, and I was inquisitive. So my buddy and I went up there, and they buried their dead out on rock slabs, and just let the birds pick at the bodies. I'm sorry we ever went up there.
Yeah, I bet that was a little
But it was the
spooky
only
view.
place they had 8mm film. I stalked up. Of course,
Now there's got to be a commercial in that somewhere.
yeah,
Where do you get your film? Oh, up in the
of course,
Ravens
then
Point.
we went through the Suez Canal,
Yeah.
back out into. We headed right for Naples.
Yeah. And then that's your second ship was.
This is going back to the
Oh,
States.
this is still going back home.
And from there we went to Gibraltar and stuff like that.
But you had a.
Well, we actually got to go to Alicante, Spain on this cruise. They invited us to Alicante, and all the fishing fleet came out and met us. We were the first destroyer in there for a long time. And they set up a bar on the pier, and they had dancing with Spanish girls every
Now
night.
you like that.
Oh, man, we had a ball.
Yeah.
It was the first time I ever saw the ship leave, and guys were crying because we were leaving.
Oh.
It was
that's
a great
nice.
experience.
Yeah.
I got to go over to the bullfights, and free tickets to bullfights, and free drinks all around the house.
They treated you well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's really good.
So then we went back to Norfolk. That's when I got assigned to.
And your second
This was
tour was, and well, just tell us quickly what was that all about? I mean, you weren't involved in
Well,
any
we were
conflict
just
or anything.
assigned to the Mediterranean Fleet, mostly as a show of force.
Uh-huh.
So we'd go into all these ports: Algiers, Palermo, Marseille, Toulon, Cannes, France. We were back at Alicante. The naval base, big naval base at Italy, Italy's naval base at Toronto. Leghorn, which is off Naples. Theoul-sur-Mer, which is a little French town.
Yeah.
They invited us in because they invited us in with an English and a French and an American destroyer, and we happened to be the American destroyer. We had to get up a crew of guys. They had a parade in downtown, and we looked terrible compared to the British and the French. They looked sharp, you know. We were designed for marching.
No. No, they forgot who you were. You were
Then
you're
we went
Americans.
from there to Piraeus, which is the port off of Athens, Greece. And we got a lot of liberty into Athens. I went up to the Acropolis, all of that. And then we were assigned to go into Istanbul with 2 other destroyers and a cruiser. And we went through the Bosporus with all guns manned because of the trouble we were having with Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a little bit leery about us going through there. So I got liberty in Istanbul, went to the Blue Mosque, went to the President's Palace, saw all the gold carriages. It was great. And we had it was a Saturday, and we all had to stand, you know, in dress dues while the President of Turkey came down all along the whole ships lined up. It's just a big show.
Yeah, just a show.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, of course.
But that whole Mediterranean area, you know, post World War II, they loved having you come in. And
yeah, because it was.
Yeah, oh, of course. Yeah, yeah. And then after that, you served 4 years. I think.
After that, I came back and I went right. I was ready to be discharged. And when I was at the receiving center to be discharged, I got a telegram. They asked me if I'd sign up. They'd give me first class and I could teach electrical school in any school in the United States, naval school. Mountains were called.
Oh, that's nice.
So,
you had your fill of that.
Then another telegram came, and they said they needed a skeleton crew to take a carrier around the tip of South America and up to Bremerton, Washington. And I said, no, this is a ploy.
Yeah.
So I just completed.
You didn't fall for it, so you just left it entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you finally got back, was your family glad to see you and happy? And,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They were probably worried.
Well, I was more happy than they were.
Yeah.
Because they all were married, and of course
Carrying on.
the kids were all over me. And I said, well, it's about time for me to settle down and have a family, you know.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to work as an electrician, and built my own home.
All that
Had
stuff.
the 2 boys.
Yeah.
2 boys are electricians, and the whole business is great.
Yeah, it's a family business now, I know,
Yeah.
and the 2 boys whom I know well are
Yeah.
heading up, and they still have the wisdom with you coming into the office 2 or 3 times a week
Yeah.
or something, didn't you say?
They don't need me, but
Oh, yes, they do.
and we have 2 grandchildren. So
Yeah. So you could say that your career in the military actually sort of spearheaded your lifetime career.
Really, I would never have been an electrician. And thanks to Buddy Strong for coming
hooking
back
you.
in that opera house then.
Do you ever talk to him about that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, when we were down in San Diego loading up with ammunition to get ready to go to Korea, his ship, he was on a destroyer, came in from Hawaii. And he came over and we visited.
Oh,
And then right after that, he got a medical discharge.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. So your experience was a good one. And for you,
Oh, yeah.
there wasn't all the political stuff surrounding it as much as there, I mean,
Oh.
there has been since
Well,
then, but
That's another thing. That's one reason I didn't stay in. When you get back around even the Mediterranean, it gets too military.
yeah.
Pretty soon you're having inspections. And I just didn't.
That wasn't you.
No. Because when you're in Korea and stuff like that, you didn't have time for that baloney that goes with all of it. It's too military.
Yeah. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah, in fact, the captain, God, I can remember the first inspection we had aboard this destroyer escort. I was standing, you know, we were ready, all standing in for inspection.
Mhm.
He came down the line, and he stood in front of me, and I said, oh, man, what did I do? What's the matter with my uniform? And you had to wear your ribbon. And this is before we just left for the Mediterranean. He said, you're the only man aboard that served in Korea. And
Oh, my goodness.
I felt good about it.
Yeah, so he wasn't looking at
No.
you in a bad way.
No,
Wow.
and I was sweating blood.
Yeah, but you sure felt good after that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, then it's pretty obvious to say that your military experience was a good one.
Oh, yeah. All the way. Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, it was probably 3 years the best of my life. Almost 4. Except for Great Lakes. I mean, what, too crazy?
That wasn't too fun.
No,
Yeah. You can see why people come to Aspen from up there to ski.
really.
Yeah.
Boy, that wind can come off of that Lake Michigan. Chilly. I was never that cold in Aspen. You know, it's a dry cold.
Yeah. Well, before we bring this to a conclusion, is there anything that you can think of that you'd like to share with us? Anything that you haven't, or that you've thought about and haven't shared? About your military time and what it meant to you?
Well, the only thing, no, not really. The only thing I could say to any young boy that plans on the military, the Navy is it.
The Navy is it.
Navy, Air Force.
There's that commercial we've been looking for.
Navy. I mean, you get training. I don't care where you are. You get some type of training. It isn't all footwork or something like that. Because you're always, like I say, there's always something to learn. If you're aboard ship, I don't know how it is in other branches. Of course, I had one brother that was a Navy corpsman. He was first class. That was Bertie. And my brother Ed, the one that's died, he was an aviation machinist mate, and he had a good life at Alameda. And my brother Joe was the only one that had it rough. He was in the Seabees, the 4th Naval Battalion.
Oh, really?
Construction Battalion. And he saw a lot of action on Okinawa. And my other brother, Martin, he was on an attack transport. And they were just loading up, and my brother Joe, they were getting ready for the invasion of Japan. And my brother Joe had met my brother Martin on Okinawa. And the attack transport, they went directly to Japan with all their troops and stuff with the occupation forces.
Well, you could say you had some good luck. You had the good fortune.
That's what I say.
Yeah.
I was blessed.
You were indeed. Well,
to do all the traveling and see all the places.
Yeah.
You know.
And you appreciated it, obviously. It meant a lot to you.
Yeah. It was great.
Well, I'd like to thank you for sharing some time with us and your thoughts and your memories, and especially that great story about getting initiated. I think that's, we'll make sure that one makes it to the Library of Congress.
That'll follow me to my death.
Yeah. Well, anyway, a big thank you to GrassRoots Television for participating in this event. I'd also like to thank the Thrift Shop and the wonderful ladies of the Thrift Shop who are willing to help out with just about anything, and the Elks Club, of course, and their financial support for this program. Again, it's the Aspen Veterans History Project, and I think that the effort has been worthwhile, and I've certainly enjoyed this, Loui, and thank you for spending time with me.
Yeah,
and with that, I'll close her down.
Thank you.
That was great.